All right. So we are recording this earlier in the morning because of the time difference between where I'm at in Los Angeles and in Iran. Our guest is in Iran. She's actually in Esfahan, the town that was targeted by Israel. I don't want to say struck because what we're seeing, at least at this point, again, this is a pre-record because of the time difference. Our guest would be hopefully well in bed by the time this show is airing. So what we're hearing right now is the media, the mainstream media is reporting that Israel's kind of cheering this on, saying that they struck Iran and that there were also some explosives that were seen simultaneously in Iraq and Syria. Iran says nothing was hit, that their defense systems took down what they say were just drones that were up above, that nothing was actually damaged. It's from just hearing what Iran is saying, the first instinct is, okay, it could be true, it could be false, obviously, right? But whether it's true or false, whether maybe something was hit, maybe something wasn't hit, Iran seems to be coming out basically saying, we're not going to do anything about this. We're not going to strike back. We're not going to cause a war. We're going to just kind of let this go. And it's easy to do that if you say nothing was hit, but maybe nothing really was hit. Our guest is, like I said, in Esfahan, Iran, Setara Siddiqui. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us, first of all, I want to get into, we're going to talk about a lot of things today, including what you do as a journalist, your life there in Iran. But tell us about these. Was there a strike? I mean, you said you heard explosions. Did you hear loud explosions?
Actually, I didn't hear anything, and I lived like maybe 20 minutes drive away from where the alleged attack happened. So if it was a serious attack, if it was missile, I and my family members and my neighbors would have definitely heard it. But I didn't hear anything, and I actually didn't know anything about it until I started scrolling on my phone and seeing it on Twitter and hearing it on the news that something has happened. And I was wondering, like, what exactly happened, because this place that the location that they're talking about is just not very far from my place. And initially, the reports in Iran were saying that explosions have been heard in Esfahan near Qahjavaristan, or the military base near that place. But then there were reports that there were missiles targeting some military base or facilities in Esfahan, which didn't really sound like what we were experiencing, because, as I told you, I didn't hear anything. Nobody that I know heard anything. Then the reports were like the Iranian media started reporting and saying that there have been explosives heard, but we don't know yet what exactly it was. And then there were official reports that said that three, like mini drones, small drones, have been identified flying over the military base, and the air defense system has intercepted and like caught them. And what some people living nearby, like closer to that place, had heard was the targeting of those objects flying in the sky.
Okay, and then we've seen some video that looks like there's a big explosion, but from what I understand, this is old. Is that right? These are old videos this is from 2023 when there was an explosion that happened?
Yeah, the videos that I have seen also are either from not even Iran or like very old pictures. So the ones that we have seen that are actually from this early morning or yesterday your time are just showing small objects flying and being targeted in the air.
Yeah. So no one that you've talked to in your town has seen any explosions, or, I mean, life is just totally normal there?
Yeah, it's totally normal. And I actually had visitors this morning, and I was asking them, "Did you hear the explosions?" And they were, "What explosion are you talking about?" And I'm like, "You didn't even like follow the news?" And they were like, "No, we were just, I mean, it's Friday, and Fridays are like the weekend, and people were having their, I don't know, picnics by the river or just hanging out, and they were not even caring what was happening." So it was absolutely normal. Actually, I had only one friend who said she had heard the explosion, and that's about it.
Oh, interesting. Was this at all reported in the news there locally?
Yes, it was. It was from the first minutes it was reported that
Like all
explosion
over
was heard.
every news organization was all over this, or was it just like fringe outlets?
Yeah. No, it was all the Iranian news outlets were reporting on it, but as I said, the initial reports were just saying that explosions have been heard in Esfahan, and because that was 4 a.m., so people were sleeping, so it took some time for people to catch up with what was happening.
Oh, okay, okay. Are you afraid of now the town of Esfahan is houses the largest nuclear is that the largest nuclear facility in Iran?
Yeah, it's one of the, yeah, I think it's the largest. I'm not sure if it's the largest or one of the largest, but it's a very important one. It's not inside Esfahan city. It's actually in another town near Esfahan. And it's actually known for being a very prominent research center.
Does this make you nervous that it's so nearby and there's always discussion of the Israelis targeting nuclear facilities?
Well, the nuclear facility, as I told you, is far from the city, even farther than the military base that the saboteurs were trying to target this morning. So, I mean, it's definitely concerning if they want to attack that nuclear facility, but it's not very dangerous for the cities around. Hopefully, I'm not very concerned because I'm very confident of Iran's defense system. So it's not that I don't think Israel would do anything crazy. It's more because I think the Iranian defense system is really well prepared, and we can see that from how they responded to the attack on Iranian embassy in Syria. It was a very well calculated and yeah, very well calculated attack on the military base that in Israel that launched a missile on the Iranian embassy in Syria. Iran used basically the oldest and the cheapest missiles that they had, so it
Yeah,
didn't really cost Iran much. And they could get quite a good map of how the defense system in Israel, the anti-missile defense system in Israel works. So it wasn't it wasn't only out of anger or anything. It was very calculated, and even Iran gave like about 72 hours warning ahead, and still um, Israel couldn't get they couldn't intercept all the missiles that were that were like launched against the
yeah.
military base.
There's been talk of war between Israel and Iran, which then would rope in the United States and the West with Iran for many years now. I think the rhetoric has really ramped up quite a bit since. Well, I'd actually. I mean, it's been around for quite a while, but more recently, it seems to have ramped up more. Is this something that you in Iran, or not just yourself, but the people anecdotally, the people that you talk to? I know you're a freelance journalist. I'm sure you talk to a lot of people. Is this a concern of Iranians?
It is a concern for some Iranians, but it has not interrupted their or normal life. I've heard some people asking, like coming up to me or asking me, "Do you think a war is actually going to happen?" But then even before I reply, they're saying, "I don't think that's going to happen," and it's partly because we have been hearing that for the past 40 something years. I mean, ever since we had the popular revolution in 1979, and we toppled the dictator that was the U.S. backed dictator. We have been threatened, we have been sanctioned, we have been targeted by US backed forces inside and outside Iran by Saddam, who was backed and armed by not only the US, but also Germany and some other European countries. So it's been a non-stop struggle. And by now, we have developed some sort of strong resistance against it. And uh, the truth is that a lot of this, like this war or we're about to have this war rhetoric that we're hearing has American and European audience more than Iranian audience. So inside Iran, you don't really hear that. I remember even back I mean, ever since the war on Gaza and the genocide on Gaza started after October 7, there were more talks of attacking Iran because of its support for the resistant groups inside the U.S. But inside Iran, because I'm married to an American, I could and I hear the American side, but as well as the Iranian side. And then inside Iran, nobody was actually worried about it at all. It was not something that people discussed. And if you ask people, do you think there would be a war? They would probably ask you, why do you think, like, why are you even asking that question? But now with the things that recently happened with the U.S. targeting Israel targeting Iranian embassy in Syria, there are people who are concerned. This is something that people talk about, but as I said, there are a lot of jokes about it, and especially after people like on different groups and social media and like friends with friends and families, and we discuss it, and everybody's actually joking about how there were this just toy drones flying over this facility, and
Mhm.
it's like Israel wanted to say, I did something, but please don't attack us. So
Right.
it's,
Right.
and we also know that the US sent Iran a message to allow Israel to do like a minor attack to save face, and like, finish or close the case, but Iran did not accept that. And that was all that Israel could do. I mean, just hiring some saboteurs inside Iran. And this is not the first time, by the way, that they did this. Back in January 2023, Israel also hired saboteurs inside Iran to fly drones with grenades attached to them to fly over a military base, actually, again, in Esfahan. And that was also intercepted, and it did not really cause much damage.
Right, I think that's the one that I think it caused a little bit more damage than this one, it wasn't much, but
Yeah,
I think that's the video
exactly.
that we've been seeing a
Exactly.
lot of, kind of like a small explosion,
Hmm.
that people are kind of attributing to this attack, but that's not the only thing that you're right, the only thing we've seen has just been some flashes of light in the sky in regards to
Exactly.
this recent attack. What is the relationship between Iran and Israel? From your perspective, why is it so tense?
Well, the Iranian public, even before the revolution and during the Pahlavi monarchy, were always supportive of Palestine because they feel very close to the cause and to the Palestinian nation, because we share a lot with them. And it's like a sort of resistance, especially against imperialism and colonialism, has always been a part of Iranian culture. So they see eye to eye with the Palestinian nation. But the government, the Pahlavi regime, uh, um, was worked with Israel, and the Savak, which was the intelligence service Pahlavi regime, and is and like notorious for uh, its like very like barbaric methods of torture, was actually trained by Mossad. So people, that's like the first things, or one of the first things that Iranians remember of their previous the previous government working with Israel, was to torture Iranian dissidents inside, in Iranian, in the government prisons, in the Pahlavi prisons inside Iran. And then after that, Israel, because the U.S. has always been supporting, like offering unconditional support for Israel, and because we also know that Biden, back when he was a senator, he said that if Israel is so crucial to protecting the U.S. Interest in the region, that if there was no Israel, they would have to create an Israel in order to protect U.S. interests in the region. So Israel has always been playing a role in all sorts of aggression against Iran. So if it was either directly the U.S. getting involved, or getting Israel doing the job for them. Israel also, there's this notorious terrorist group, which is often called the Iranian opposition group by mainstream media, and it's called the MEK. And they have a record of at least 17,000 assassinating at least 17,000 Iranians, and they're hated by all sorts of and all Iranians of all walks and all political orientations and religious orientation. They're hated by everyone here because of all the aggressions that they have done, and because also they also worked with Saddam to against Iran. And Israel has been training Mossad to carry out assassination of nuclear scientists inside Iran. Actually, back during the Bush administration, when MEK was still on on the list of terrorist organizations by the U.S. and EU. The Bush administration, together with Mossad and FBI, were training MEKs in Nevada inside US to assassinate nuclear scientists in Iran. And Seymour Hersh actually has a good article about it. He wrote it many years ago, so people can just look up and see. So there's this history of hostility coming from Israel and the US against Iranians. And obviously that's how Iranians feel I mean, the US and Israel.
Is there just a hatred for Jews? That is what a lot of people in the narrative want to, well, a lot of people believe that. They want to continue pushing that idea that this is just Islam versus Judaism.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's definitely out of ignorance, but it's, um, like the city where I come from, Esfahan, is known for the peaceful coexistence of Christians, Jews, and Muslims. There are at least 11 active churches in my city. I've worked in the Christian district. I'm sure a lot of people cannot even imagine that there are churches, active churches, or Christian community in Iran, and they have their representatives in the parliament. And the Jews also, they have their synagogues, their active synagogues, and the Jews also have their representatives in the parliament. So we coexist with each other. We don't have any issues with each other. You can walk into a Jewish shop in Esfahan and see the menorah, I don't know, like all sorts of Jewish symbols, and we just respect each other. We have no problems with each other. But the question of Palestine and the question of Israel is a very different thing. It's an occupying, usurping force that is taking an occupying Palestinian land for 75 years, that has been recognized as an apartheid regime by the United Nations, and that has violated all sorts of international laws, basically. And by the way, it's one of the very few countries that is not a member of the NPT, which is the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and possesses nuclear bombs. Even though Israel has been always accusing Iran of possessing nuclear bombs, they are the ones that actually have the nuclear bombs and have been threatening Europe and America and Iran with it. And everybody knows that, and they don't even feel like they have to sign the NPT or anything.
Right.
And Israel is doing everything with impunity. They're carrying out a genocide in Gaza. They're attacking Syria, Iraq, Iran, Lebanon, and nobody is condemning them. Even when the attack on the Iranian embassy happened, you didn't see any. We didn't see any Western government condemning the attack. Not even the UN. I mean, they did not even pass a resolution or anything for holding Israel accountable for all the aggression that and for all the violation of international law that it's doing.
Yeah, it was an attack on two sovereign nations, Iran and Syria, to go
Exactly.
after an embassy inside of
Exactly.
Syria. It's just goes against everything that an embassy, what the entire system of this, this diplomatic system of embassies, it goes against all of that. I want to go back to these Christian and churches and synagogues inside of Iran. I do think this is interesting, and many people would not think that that's something that exists there. Are they still required to wear the hijab?
The Christians and the Jews.
Yeah.
Yes, the hijab law is for everyone. It's more relaxed in the Christian areas. And they're actually the ones that have the Jewish Iranians and the Christian Iranians are actually the ones that have almost never protested against the law, because they understand how the culture works. Because what's mostly missed on Western media is that, yes, there is a law that a lot of people disagree with and protest, and rightfully, like they have the right to protest and to ask for changes. But there's also a significant portion of the society that thinks that is like changing the law, or I don't know, like ignoring the significance of this culture, issue is an attack on their identity. Because back during the first Pahlavi was, worked with the British government to impose cultural codes and dress codes inside Iran, which included banning hijab and banning chador, the
Hmm.
Iranian dress, on Iranian women. And actually, a lot of Iranian women had to stay at their homes because they could not come out with hijab, and it was very violent. Like the police would drag them and pull the chadors off their heads, and many Iranians had actually had to like immigrate to uh, some Arab countries to live there because that was where they could practice their beliefs and be part of the society. So it's like a flashback, and that's why. I mean, if it was only the issue of hijab, I'm sure there would be a lot more tolerance. But when it comes with all the propaganda and all the money that the US is putting into these so-called movements, which are actually, a lot of these movements are not grassroots moves, and they movements, like they're not coming from inside, and that's why you don't see much change. Because if it was indigenous, you would see more changes, because Iranian women have been able to change a lot of laws and a lot of things inside Iran. I give you an
Hmm.
example. Like there is no law that bans women from riding their bicycles on the streets. But culturally, it used to be very unacceptable for many years. And the thing that women did here, especially in my city, was that they didn't launch hashtag revolutions or taking to the street or anything, because they knew that there's a part of the society that does not like that. So the way was not to attack that part of society, but to practice what they believed in. So they started riding their bicycles around the city, um, and respecting everybody else. And now this has become such a normal scene that when you go to the streets, you see a lot more women riding their bicycles than men, actually. So
Hmm.
this is how things work here. And if you want to change a law, or this was not actually a law, but if even with the laws, like in the parliament, women have been able to change the laws in favor of themselves. There's still a lot of room for progress and to work, but more than 70% of university graduates in Iran are women, and they're very powerful. They're working in different jobs. They have positions in different sectors, so they know how to do it. But it's a long and slow process rather than an overnight, riot or taking over to the streets.
But there have been reports like Masa Amini, right, who took off her headscarf. She took off the hijab and ended up being, I mean, ultimately killed. So it seems like
Yeah.
it's the law, the bicycle, I understand there's no law against it, but there was a culture against
Mhm.
it. And so there was nothing anybody could really do when the women started riding their bikes because there was no law against it. But there is a law against
Mhm.
taking off your headscarf.
Yes, and in the case of Masa Amini, she actually was wearing her headscarf, but she was according to the what we call uh, whatever police, the guide in the Farsi we call them the guidance patrol.
Right.
So
We
the
call them
guidance
morality
patrol
police.
stopped. Yeah, because that's the idea that existed in the past in the West, like many years ago. So they have some ideas of the morality police. But again, she was not killed. She was wrongfully, and we're everyone inside Iran. I mean, most people inside Iran are against how she was detained because of her dress code, and that's very unfair. But she was not killed, meaning that because of the stress, probably because of the stress that she went through, and because of her medical condition, she died, which is tragic. And I think the government is responsible for that, and they have to take hold people accountable for it. But it's also important to remember that this is not very common. Even though even one case is too much and there should be zero tolerance for it, it is not something that happens on a daily basis. Like the number of people who die in custody in Iran, in police custody in Iran, is still much lower than the number of women or just women or men that die in custody in, for example, the US. So it's important to have everything in perspective. There is a law and there is a very wrong method of enforcement of the law that almost even religious people, even I myself who practice wearing hijab, oppose it. And we want changes, and we have been like, I was also part of the online movement that was calling for the abandonment of that patrol. But that's different from going with the anti-Iran propaganda and repeating the same things that some U.S. government contractors that pose as being Iranian opposition leaders, and they just stand alone. So, and it actually makes our struggle a lot more difficult, because if I or any other Iranian woman wants to take to the street to oppose this law or this law, the methods of law enforcement, now we have to think twice, because I want to oppose this law, but at the same time, I don't want to be repeating the words that are coming from the enemy that has imposed sanctions on me, has targeted my nation and everything. So I have to reconsider everything. It makes our struggle a lot more difficult. If they stayed out of it, and they just, this is an internal issue. Just deal with your internal issues and let us deal with our internal issues. We don't need to be empowered. We are very powerful. We know
Yeah.
how to deal with our stuff. So let us do our job, and you just do your job. So you're not helping. I know that some of the people who want to speak out against it, and this, like, there was like a crazy amount of coverage, online coverage that was pretty much exaggerated. For example, during the last year's protests. And I know that a lot of people do it out of good intentions, because they want to support Iranian women. But the right way to do it is to just let Iranian women do their job. And if you can do anything, it's to oppose your government's decisions against Iran, which affects Iranian women more than anybody else. Like, the sanctions are taking job opportunities away from Iranian women more than Iranian men. So if you want to oppose anything, that's the thing that you can work on.
Hmm. I hear you on, the US meddling, and there's always that fear of that meddling. And so it causes people to think twice about protesting and rising up, because they know that it's going to be infiltrated or used in a way that's going to
Exactly.
be, that's going to have a worse outcome than what the people are just trying to get. They're just trying to get something simple, but then it turns into an entire, big, huge potential revolution or regime change or coup or whatever.
Exactly.
Right. Do you
Exactly.
think that that law will change? I mean, I understand. Well, I didn't know. I didn't know that the Shah had put a restriction. So women were not allowed to wear the hijab under the Shah.
No, they were not. Like, even when my mom went to school during the second Pahlavi, she said that a lot of schools would not allow her to wear the hijab. It was a big struggle for women to wear their hijab.
So even if they wanted to, they were religiously, that's what they chose. They were not allowed to do that. That's interesting.
No.
We see a
No.
lot of photographs of Iran before and after the Ayatollah. And you
Mhm.
see a very Western looking world. In fact, my family lived in Iran. They came from Vietnam. When they left Vietnam, they moved.
Mhm.
They were in Iran for a couple of years. I even have family members that were born there. And then the revolution happened,
Interesting.
and my family had to leave. And my family members that were born there actually had to get diplomatic. We had to get a United States. My family, I wasn't alive, but my family had to get a United States senator involved to get my family that was born in Iran out of Iran, to say they're not Iranian at all. They were born there, but they're not actually Iranian. But from even my own grandmother's recollection of Iran and how and what it was like, there was nightclubs and parties, and the women wore whatever they wanted to wear, and it was a very different world than what happened, what was brought about when the Ayatollah came around. And I guess I could understand the backlash to there was this terrible Shah that was very brutal and Western backed, and as you said, trained by Mossad and supported by the West. And so I can understand that backlash, but it does seem to be a bit extreme to go in the exact opposite direction, right? And say, well, you were first banned from wearing the hijab, but now you have to wear the hijab. Like, why not just let the women decide if they
Mhm.
want to wear it, if they're religious or not? Do you think it'll
Yeah. Well,
change?
the thing. I think there is a possibility that it will change, but it also depends on how much the U.S. and European countries want to meddle in Iran's affair. And I think if they just give up on the issue of the dress code inside Iran, the Iranian government will allow more space for women to practice what they want. I mean, actually, even now, for example, the dress code for the university is a lot more relaxed than the time I went to university. So there's
Mm,
a lot of change happening inside Iran, both culturally and the law. Like the enforcement of the hijab law is a lot easier now than back then. And depending on what happens, when there are threats feeling coming felt coming from outside, there's more restrictions being imposed. Like actually, during the Nowruz holidays, which is our New Year, I was just walking in Isfahan and then also in Tehran, and you actually see a lot of women not wearing the hijab anymore. Like some people have it around their neck, so if they see like the patrol, they will just cover.
mhm.
Some people didn't even have that, so they feel free and they just walk without the hijab. But regarding what you said, like the comparison between before the revolution and after the revolution, what the majority of those reports miss is that the women's condition, apart from the dress code, was not better at all. Right now, we have a higher percentage of women that attend universities. That like back then, the literacy rate was very low. There were a lot of women and like families, not just women, uh, struggling with poverty. They were living in ghettos. They could not have jobs. And so a lot of things actually improved for women in terms of being able to attend the schools. And actually part of it was because of the Islamic scholars or the clerics, because they said that women should get education, women should be part of the society. And the fact that we say that there should be a dress code is because we want the women to be in the society. If we want the women to be kept in their houses, we wouldn't focus on the issue of the dress code. So they were like, there were these conservatives part of the society that said, oh, no, women shouldn't go out or women shouldn't go to university. But a lot of these Islamic scholars encouraged women actually to go outside. So a part of it was that's a part of the acceptance of the hijab law during the first years was because people were seeing that there are a lot of improvements happening in other areas. But after Iran got more stable, because right after the revolution, we had the assassination of top Iranian officials, and then we immediately had, within a year almost, we had the Saddam's attack on us. And so we
Mhm.
were going through a lot during the first years, and people were not actually very concerned about the hijab law. And the hijab law actually didn't wasn't imposed right after the revolution. It took a few years until
Yeah.
it became the law. So we it's if you're comparing before a couple of women in bikinis and then women in chador, because the women who are wearing the chador or hijab, it's not necessarily that they are forced to do that. Uh, Still, even with all the changes that have happened in the society and more people are going towards a more relaxed dress code, still there is a significant portion of the population that believes in wearing the scarf and practicing. So they don't see
Sure.
a problem with the law. I mean, they
Right.
want people to be allowed to choose it, but they don't have a problem with it. So and this is of course the dynamics are changing over years, as I said. But this is also very important to remember that not everyone feels they are forced to wear this.
Right. I could understand. I mean, that makes a lot of sense that there was a real conservative faction of society that was like, no way, women should not be out doing anything. We want them to stick to their conservative roles. And I could understand where the compromise was, all right, fine. We don't, women, we want them out in society. We want them doing things, getting educations, getting jobs. We'll just fine. They'll wear the hijab. And then that kind of calms the real ultra conservative faction down, making that
Mhm.
type of compromise. I could see where that comes from rather than it coming from this ultra religious place of all women just must wear this. It's interesting
Mhm.
perspective that you bring to us. So thank you for that. Um, let's talk about the chant, the death to America and death to Israel chant. So that's what makes the news here, right? It's that Israel is, I mean, Iran, excuse my Freudian slip, which is more accurate, I think. Iran is a hostile actor towards the United States. And there's evidence of this because of the chant. You know, you see them in their legislature chanting death to America, death to Israel. What does this mean? I mean, you want to blow us up? Do you think the government wants to blow us up?
Well, obviously not. But the thing that I always tell my friends when they bring that up is that look at U.S. actions and Iran's actions against each other, like the other nation. How many times has the Iran attacked like U.S. interest or Israel, even Israel's interest, and how many times have the U.S., for example, imposed sanctions on us, supported an armed terrorist against us, attacked our bases and everything. So it's one thing to say death to you and another thing to actually bring death to the people, because if the US sanctions have been actually killing people inside Iran, there are people who cannot access medicine because of US sanctions, and the third party sanctions make it even more difficult. In one example, there is this butterfly disease that a lot of kids or some kids get it, and it's a very severe and very difficult condition, and it requires a particular wound dressing. And Iran used to buy that wound dressing from a Swedish company, but the Swedish company stopped selling it to Iran, citing US sanctions. And so while Iran was working on developing a domestic version of that dress wounding, a lot of these children died. So nobody is talking about that. This is death to Iran. This is an actual death to Iran, and nobody is talking about it. But the other point is also that the word that we use in Farsi, which is marg bar Amerika, marg bar, it's like death to is not a very exact translation of that, because we can use marg bar for abstract ideas. You can use that for, like, I don't know, any school of thoughts, like traffic or anything that you get angry with. So it does not really mean, it's not literal. And a better translation would be down with. And actually, that's like you see a lot of, for example, if you go to a rally, like a pro-Iran rally inside Iran, you will see the signs or the banners that people are carrying usually has a better translation, which is down with, and it's because of the policies that they have exerted against us. So no, we don't want to blow anyone up, and we have never done that, unlike US and Israel. But we have never done that. And actually, the Iranian people are very welcoming to other cultures. And because the American dream has been selling pretty well inside Iran, Americans are highly welcomed and celebrated inside Iran. It's like if you travel as an American inside Iran, people get really excited and they want to talk to you, and they're very friendly to you.
So you say things like death to traffic, death to taxes, death to, it's like is this like a common phrase you use just for anything you don't like?
It's not that very common, but yes, it is. Like you even have songs where that's like it's used to say like that's to, I don't know, something that is bad. So it's not for people.
Okay. That's what I thought. I thought that it was kind of just a phrase. Like we always say, oh my gosh, I would kill for a steak, right? Or I'd kill for something right now, but we don't really mean we're going to actually.
Exactly.
Although the steak, you do have to kill something in order to eat that steak. So I guess that wasn't exactly the best example. But it's like I'd kill for warm weather right now, and we don't really literally mean that. But there are many times in our language where we say things that when we're so used to hearing it that we don't stop to actually think what we're saying and how that sounds to a foreigner who's listening to us and interpreting it for the first time and saying, you do what? For what? For candy? You kill for candy? Exactly. You people are murderous barbarians, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like the cultural baggage, the cultural things that come with it are very important to bear in mind.
I think it's, for me, it's always been pretty easy to understand simply because I come from a multicultural background with having to grow up in a home where I had parents speaking two different languages, two different religions, two different cultures, two different everything, and having to navigate my way through that. It's always been, I can understand these things, and but I can also understand why people don't and how because they weren't exposed to different cultures. They've been living in their bubble, and
Exactly.
they think the world, they just haven't had that exposure. It's no fault of theirs except for, just life circumstances. But
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, I get people telling me, like my non-Iranian friends telling me, but it would be better if he didn't say that, or it would be better if the government didn't force the hijab law. And I will say, yes, you're right, maybe it would be better, but you are not in a position to tell Iranians what to do. But what you can do to improve the relations between, for example, Iran and America, is to ask your representatives to revise their policies against Iran because it's affecting Iranian people. Like, I mean, the government will always find its ways to evade sanctions or evade, I don't know, to protect its interests, but the people are the ones that are suffering. And if you are really caring about Iranian people, I can't believe like this is genuine unless I see you are actively working against sanctions, against all sorts of aggression, against supporting terrorism and all these terrorist groups that like John Bolton was the other day during the last year protest on the BBC interview was bragging about how they have managed to get the arms to their agents inside Iran to use against police
Yeah.
forces. I mean, which country allows for the massacre or the killing of their police and just want to give up on protecting their interests?
Sorry, we just broke up for a second there, but I think the feed is catching up. I know that there's quite the distance between us. Um, so hopefully it's caught up now. I'm hoping it's caught up. Okay. Sorry about that. With,
Hopefully.
technology is, they're still catching it. They're still working on it, apparently. Um,
Yeah.
it's, John Bolton, for one, is an insane person who just wants to wage war. And in particular, he really wants to wage war with Iran. The sanctions and whatnot on Iran, it's amazing to me how the United States government and even a lot of the people are just really able to hold a grudge. I mean, this country can hold a grudge. I mean, look at Cuba, right? I mean, the Castro came into power how many years ago, and yet the United States still won't let it go. The Castros aren't even in power anymore, but it doesn't matter. It's just this punishment of the Cuban people, punishment for them not toppling their government, essentially, for, putting these sanctions on them, hoping that they would rise up and topple their government. They don't. And so we just keep on it. Just that ability to hold the grudge. Same thing with Iran. I mean, it really seems to have come down to when the Shah was in the revolution, 46 years ago, right? 45, 46 years ago, this revolution happened, and the US has not been able to get over it, has not been able to get over the Western contractors which part of my family were some of those oil contractors that were booted out of the country because Iran was going to take things over, the government. And just hasn't been able to, and really, that it's interesting how the dynamic has shifted with Israel, or I'm not sure if it has or if it hasn't, but clearly it seemed that the United States really buddying up with Israel and and supporting Israel, creating that military base in the Middle East. Really, a lot of that was pointed at Iran, right? It was after the fall of the Shah, and it was directed at Iran. Like, we got to stick around. We got to be nearby. We have to have this base here because we want to keep eyes on Iran. We want to try to topple that regime and put our guys back in power. That obviously has not happened. And I don't know if that relationship is still, if Israel is doing whatever the United States wants and is allowing itself to be a military base because it's dependent on the United States, or if that dynamic has shifted. I kind of think the dynamic has shifted. And over time, the Israelis figured out how to manipulate the US government. And that was through lobbying and money
Exactly.
into the political system. And now I don't know who's in charge. I don't know who's,
Exactly.
is. But there was definitely a period of time, I think, that that Israel was used by the United States as a base, as a military base, eyes and ears, and using Mossad to do things that the U.S. couldn't do legally to try to topple the Iranian regime.
Yeah, that's exactly how it is, and it's kind of as an Iranian, it's become more confusing exactly like who is controlling the other one. And to be honest, with the recent, uh, like U.S. messaging to Iran that and to Israel that the U.S. I mean, for now, they have said and they have warned Israel that they would not want to get involved in a war against Iran. I think that, I mean, I hope that's a sign of reconsidering how much U.S. national interests are being sacrificed for supporting Israel unconditionally. Like, it's not even benefiting Americans. It's not benefiting anyone. So, and it's time for people to wake up to the truth. And I think this is gradually happening. When the genocide, the recent round of genocide in Gaza started, we are seeing a lot more people waking up and being. I can't imagine how there are still people who think this genocide is okay. I mean,
Mhm.
how is there any form of justification for it? And why is not the words holding Israel accountable? It's not only Israel is not only killing Palestinians, it's killing Americans, it's killing the Europeans. Like the UNRWA staff or the World Kitchen staff that were killed by Israel were not Palestinians. They were not part of Hamas for sure. And nobody's doing anything. They're not even condemning the attack. So I think we need to see more objection to the impunity that Israel is getting for all the crimes that it's committing against all nations.
Why do you think the other Middle Eastern nations aren't going to war against Israel to save the Palestinian people? I mean, that's what we talked about with World War II, even though that wasn't really it wasn't really the reason for getting into World War II, right? So I guess I kind of answered my own question because the reasons countries got in was because when they were attacked, then they were like, all right, we're getting in. It wasn't because, oh, we got to save these Jews that are being Holocausted.
Exactly.
So I guess maybe it takes an attack. Why do you think that other countries are not willing to do more for the Palestinian people?
I think one reason because a lot of these governments are actually puppets of the U.S. government, and they don't really reflect the willpower of their nations. And the other thing is that they do not have the military capability, and they are scared of getting into a war with Israel. I mean, in Israel and the U.S. have been trying very hard after JCPOA, the so-called Iran nuclear deal. They wanted to have another deal with Iran to restrict Iran's power to develop missiles. And if Iran had given in and had not developed its or improved its missile technology, Iran would be scared of Israel's attack too. But this is the deterrence that we have developed because we knew that we need a military capability to protect ourselves, to protect our borders. But many of these countries in the region are just caring about the money that they're getting, and they don't even have the military capability if without like U.S. support. So they have to stand
Mm.
where the U.S. stands.
Yeah, like Saudi Arabia. I mean, what are they? They're so dependent on the U.S. military
Of
for
course.
all of their weapons and training and everything.
Also Jordan, UAE. I mean, just name it. Even
Egypt, right?
Egypt. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it was a smart strategy. You know, at one point when the U.S. had this, I mean, now I think that foreign policy needs to change, that the world has changed and the U.S. foreign policy has to change. It's just like when we look back at how countries behave themselves with their foreign policy, if you want to call it that, 1,000 years ago, and it was extremely barbaric. We've moved on from that, and I think we're people are now starting to become even more enlightened and wanting to move on from the warmongering of the past or the world domination. I mean, we've seen this over the last 70, 80 years or 100 years where, you know, even the British Empire with all of their little colonies all around the world, and they started giving them all back their independence and saying, okay, we're out of here. You know, we don't want to do this anymore. Things change, ideas change. The US clearly needs to have a shift in that foreign policy. At one point, though, when that was the foreign policy, which was world domination through military might, I suppose it was quite smart to rope in all of these other Middle Eastern countries and make them dependent on the United States, right? It's a form of colonialism. Well, you're dependent on
Yeah,
us, so
of
you
course.
can't think for yourself, right?
Yeah, but even I mean, it's amazing how even a lot of I mean, apart from what we're seeing in Palestine and in Gaza, even a lot of European countries are not standing up to U.S. and we see in the case of Ukraine and Russia,
Well, they're
a
also
lot of them
dependent. They're dependent on the United
exactly.
States as well.
Exactly. Yeah, they're totally dependent and just saying yes to whatever the US wants and sacrificing the national interest and their and the and you know like it they're harming their own people because they can't say no to the US.
Yeah, it's definitely it's been powerful for a long time, but it is crumbling. People are starting to say they don't want to do it this way anymore. It's just an old form of colonialism or a recent form that is now shifting. Um,
That's true.
so in Iran, you've got you mentioned before we got on this interview that there's a new law in the United States that is going to ban Americans from traveling to Iran. Is this similar to the ban of going to Russia? Can you get there? But now it's going to be you have to go through all these other countries to get there. Tell us about this law.
Well, the bill was introduced to the House last year, but it was not passed until I think it was either yesterday or a day before that it was passed in the House, and it's called No Payday for Hostage Takers, as if the whole Iranian government is sitting there waiting for Americans to come and take them hostage. And like and as I told you, like I'm married to an American. My husband has been traveling to Iran without any problems, and nobody wanted to take him hostage. And there are a lot of Americans actually. You can see their like travelogues or their Instagram or YouTube. They're traveling to Iran, reporting about their experience, how they feel welcome, then they feel safe, and they have had no issues. But for some reason, there are people in the U.S. government that want to portray Iran as the demon that is like kidnapping everyone and it's just so unsafe and everything. But this bill is going to affect a lot of Iranian Americans and also Americans like who are like families like my own who are like married to Americans who are married to Iranians. It becomes very difficult for them to visit Iran and to visit their families inside Iran because they now the U.S. government can revoke their passports if their passport is stamped in Iran. So yeah, I mean there are probably ways to evade that, and I don't know how. But it's very frustrating that there are just like more anti-Iran laws as if they're not enough that are affecting people. Like, what does it do to the Iranian government? How many Americans actually are already traveling to? I mean, there are not many Americans who are traveling to Iran as a tourist
Right.
because of all the sanctions and the anti-Iran propaganda. And those who are they're like very few tourists, and others are probably having traveling to Iran because they have family members, and now they cannot visit their families because someone in the U.S. thinks that they can be taken hostage. Like, is that because you're really so concerned about the well-being of your American citizens? It's absolutely ridiculous, and I hope there are more Americans speaking out against it and maybe calling their representatives or senators because this hasn't been passed in the Senate yet. And I mean, I'm
Right.
not very hopeful, but I hope people can speak out against it.
I'll definitely have to look more into this law. That seems really bizarre. But so is when your husband comes to visit you, does he live in Iran or is he just coming to visit you in Iran?
No, because we have been married for just a few months, as we're
Oh,
working
well,
on the logistics on
congratulations.
where. Thank you. Thank you. So we're working on the logistics of where to live, but we definitely want to live in both countries because we have family members in both countries and we love to be traveling in both,
Yeah.
visit both
So when he
sides.
comes to Iran, can he go directly to Iran, or does he have to go some weird back way? I mean, now with Russia, for example, you used to be able to fly directly into Moscow from the United States. Now you got to go to like Istanbul. You got to get to Turkey first before you can get to Moscow, or you got to go to Dubai, or you got to go
Yeah,
somewhere else. So is there
that's
a
the
direct?
same.
It's the same. So there's no
No,
direct flights into
there,
Iran.
yeah, there has not been a direct flight for a very long time, and so yeah, he has to travel through, I don't know, either Qatar or Istanbul or other countries to
Oh wow.
come to
Okay.
Iran.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I've been invited to go to Iran. I've been just by people who are, nobody affiliated with any sort of government or organization. They've just said you should just go and see for yourself. Just go visit Iran, and non-government people, non-political people. Maybe they like politics, but they've just invited, and they've said that I would love it there. That Americans are treated really well. That Americans are kind of like celebrities, like walk around and people are,
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm not afraid of being in Iran. I'm afraid of the consequences of coming back to the United States and how my
I
government would
know.
treat me after having gone to Iran, that I would be treated as a hostile actor in my own country, censored, banned. I mean, they're not going to arrest me or anything, but I just would worry that they would target my work, that they would put me on a list on all the social media sites and tell them that I'm a problematic person. They already, I'm sure, say this, but I would be even more problematic and would need to be potentially censored and removed and deplatformed. I'm really, isn't that interesting that I'm more afraid of my own government?
That's exactly how a lot of Americans, or at least my friends in America, feel like they want to visit Iran, but the consequences that their own government could like bring about is just something that
Yeah.
makes them stay away. But I mean, I hope you can travel, and I hope you won't have any consequences going back. But if you want to do it, you probably should do it before this law is passed, because it's
Yeah.
absolutely crazy and makes no sense.
Before I let you go, this has been such an,
And I
go ahead.
honestly, a lot of Iranians who are living in America, and some of them don't have an Iranian passport because they have been living there for generations. So
Oh, I know tons
yeah,
of, I
it's
mean, I live in a very, multicultural part of Los Angeles, but there are a lot of Persians, they call themselves Persians over here. I don't know if that's, do you call yourself Persian over there?
no, no, we don't. We call ourselves Iranian. Yeah.
Okay.
Because Persian is actually one ethnicity in
We had a slight freeze. Let's see if we can get her back.
Iran, and there are many different. Sorry, I was disconnected for a few
No,
seconds. Do
it's
you
okay.
hear me now?
I do. I hear we've got you back, so that's great. We're
Okay.
about to wrap up
So,
anyway, but I do have to
okay,
ask
sure.
you another question.
Sure.
Do you have free speech in Iran? So we've had this whole conversation. One of the criticisms people are going to say is, well, you're only saying the things that your government will allow you to say. Can you tell us, like, would you be in trouble if you spoke out against your government? Are you allowed to protest your government? What level of speech rights do you have there in Iran?
I think level of speech, the freedom of speech in Iran is has a lot of room to improve, and I'm not satisfied with it. I could say, but it's very different from the image that again that you get on Western media. For example, there is this political prisoner inside Iranian prisons who had a telephone conversation with Angelina Jolie, and nothing happened to her. So like how exactly are we saying that like there is no, because there are claims that she cannot contact her family, like she cannot talk on the phone or visit her family, but then she can talk to Angelina Jolie from the prison. So
Right.
it's it's like very different, right? And like we have university professors who have talked against the government, and nothing has happened to them. But you don't know. I mean, sometimes you can get into trouble. It depends probably on how much power you have in the job that you have. And I really like to see more improvements in that. But it's not like anyone who's, I mean, inside the society. So if you're not going publicly anywhere, like on a, I don't know, I mean, even on social media, you can see a lot of Iranians saying whatever they want and nothing happens to them. It depends on the position that they have and how much influence they have. So if it's a celebrity, they may get into trouble. But if it's just some
Mhm.
random people, nothing happens to them. And inside a society, like if you get into a taxi or a bus, or if you go to a shop, everyone, it's like nobody is happy with the government. But then the next day there is like an election or a pro-government rally, and you see the same people on the street. So they feel very comfortable talking about all the problems they have and the criticism they have, and it's like top to down, like against the supreme leader, against the president, against the policies and everything. So inside society, you hear a lot of criticism, like open criticism, and even swear words against the people. Like in family gatherings, you may hear that. But when you go like upper, like people who have positions or have influence, no, it's not very easy to just say whatever you want.
When you're in this conversation with me right now, do you feel, knowing that this is going to air publicly, do you have to kind of watch how you phrase things? Do you feel like you're doing that?
Not really, not at all. I mean, I've
Okay.
said whatever I actually believe in. Yes.
Okay. I do have a guest that's wanting to come on the show next week. I've been wanting to. He was recommended. He's very pro-Israel, I believe. But one of the things that he's an Iranian, I believe, living in the United States or somewhere not in Iran. And he has stated that the vast majority of the Iranian people, so there's the difference between the Iranian people and then there's the Islamic Republic of Iran. And that's the government. And the people themselves want Israel to strike Iran. This is what he's saying, is that the Iranians want Israel to strike Iran because they would like to down the government, that the Iranian people, he even has examples of graffiti that have been written on the wall that say things like, Israel strike, and then leave the rest to us. Like, not
Mhm.
wanting a toppling of the regime by outside forces, but wanting something to kind of ignite the toppling, and then the people of Iran will take over and do the toppling of the government. He's saying that the majority of Iranians feel this way, that the majority of Iranians are pro-Israel
Mhm.
and or against their government. I'll have the conversation with him, so I'm not sure if I'm totally putting his positions out there accurately, but this is what I've gathered from clips that I've watched of him.
Mhm.
Is there any truth to that?
Not at all. I mean, I live here. I've lived here for all my life, and even I have friends or family members who are totally against the government, but they would never want Israel to get involved or to bomb Iran. I have actually heard that from other like Israeli American journalists saying that, oh, Iranians want Israel to help them and to bomb them. That's not true at all. Yes, there are a few people who probably benefit from that or wants to get that because as I told you, the attack on the military saboteurs inside Iran or MEK agents that are supported by Israel. So there are agents inside Iran who think that it's a good idea to bomb, but the majority of the people are totally against it. They don't want, uh, like even those who are like who want a different form of government they would never want Israel to like attack Iran so or see that as a way of getting freedom or getting being liberated. So I totally disagree with that. And unfortunately, the problem with a lot of Iranian diaspora is that they are very detached from the realities on the ground because they have not been to Iran for the past almost 50 years at least,
Mm-hmm.
and they do not really have many connections inside Iran. And so they just read a few tweets and you can, I mean, there is a lot of information on the internet, but if people can search, there are a lot of bots that are run by these MEK terrorists and by from Israel that tweets in Farsi and in English against Iran, and they give you the impression that oh, there are so many people inside Iran that are doing that. But this has been tracked, and there is this British like social media analyst who has like tracked these bots and troll farms, and there are articles about on that. And I have discussed that on my podcast. They can just find more information about that. So unfortunately, they are very detached from the Iranian society, and they don't really know what people inside Iran want.
Yeah, interesting. And I think that's actually not just Iranian, like the Iranians in America that have lived here for the last 50 years and versus the Iranians in Iran. I think that I see that even with the Vietnamese community, the Vietnamese people living here in the United States and their thoughts and their sentiments versus my Vietnamese family living in Vietnam and the things they say about their lives and their government. We see this with Cuba. The Floridian Cubans are a very strong political
Exactly.
force. They've got a real, they hate the Cuban
Venezuela.
government, right? It's a very different, and then that's different than how the Cuban people feel in actual Cuba. So I think that's a fairly common thing, a common sentiment. I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much for being here and having it. You do have the Twice Told Tales podcast. I do have that link down below. This is your YouTube channel. How often do you post to that?
Well, we used to try to post every week, but recently I lost my father and I have been struggling with getting back to it. So, but I'm trying to post and upload new contents very soon. Hopefully.
I'm sorry for your loss. Genuinely
Thank
sorry
you.
for that. Well, we hope that you get back into the groove of things and share more of your perspective with us on your podcast. That link is down below. Thank you so much for being here. Really, really appreciate your time, and best of luck to you there.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for offering your audience a different perspective on the ground.